I spent 30 years in the tech world, and I've seen the same math error over and over again. We have a massive group of parents who will tell you, with full conviction, with data in hand, with complete intellectual certainty, that the trades are the future of this country. And then those same parents will steer their own son into 6 figures of student debt for a degree that doesn't work, rather than see him wear a tool belt that does. That's not a disagreement. That's a diagnostic. And it's time we looked at the numbers. Here's the paradox. The Goodman Project published a study in February of 2026. 73% of parents agree that trade entrepreneurs enjoy greater long-term security than tech employees. 73%. That's not a slim majority. That's nearly 3 out of 4 parents looking at the data and saying, yes, the trades are a better bet. But when those same parents were asked whether they'd prefer their child pursue a vocational path, only 7% said yes. 7. Out of 100 parents, 73 of them believe the trades are superior, and only 7 would let their own kid do it. That's a 66% gap between what people believe and what people do. And if you're an engineer like me, that gap has a name. It's called a system failure. It means the decision-making architecture is compromised. The inputs say one thing. The outputs say the opposite. And somewhere between the data and the decision, something is overriding the logic. I want to show you exactly what that something is, because it's the same force that keeps young men stuck in the drift, making life decisions based on someone else's framework instead of their own evidence. Let me set up the math first, so there's no ambiguity about what we're talking about. Trade school enrollment is up 20% since 2020. The demand for electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians, welders, it's not just rising, it's accelerating. The average age of a skilled tradesman in this country is pushing 50, and there aren't enough apprentices in the pipeline to replace them. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects a shortage of over 600,000 tradespeople by 2030. That's not a forecast, that's a structural emergency. Meanwhile, the average 4-year degree now costs over $160,000 at a state university when you include room, board, and the opportunity cost of 4 years not earning. A significant percentage of graduates, some studies put it above 40%, end up in jobs that don't require the degree they just financed. They're carrying $100,000 in debt, working a position they could have gotten out of high school, and they won't break even on the investment until their mid-30s, if ever. Now compare that to a 20-year-old who enters an electrical apprenticeship. 0 debt on day 1. He's earning while he learns. Typically $20 to $25 an hour during the apprenticeship, scaling to $45 or $50 once he's licensed. By 24, he's making $95,000 a year with no student loans, no interest payments, and 4 years of compounding savings and work experience that his college track counterpart spent accumulating debt. Run the math forward 10 years and it's not even close. The apprentice has a net worth. The graduate has a negative net worth. One of them is building a life. The other is servicing a loan. 73% of parents know this. They've seen the numbers. They've read the articles. They've watched the Mike Rowe videos. They nod along. Oh yes, the trades are wonderful. And then their 17-year-old son says he wants to be an electrician. And their face drops, like he just told them he's dropping out of society. Why? Because this was never about the money. It was never about the security. It was never about the data. It's about status. This is what I call status signaling in my book, The Visual Resume. Every human being broadcasts signals through their posture, their clothing, their job title, their vocabulary, their address, and other humans read those signals in about 30 milliseconds before a word is spoken, before a resume is reviewed, before any evidence of competence is presented. The signal arrives first, and the signal determines how you're categorized, high competence or low competence, worth my time or not worth my time, one of us or not one of us. Parents understand this instinctively. They've been navigating status hierarchies their entire adult lives. They know how the game works. And when they imagine their son as a plumber, they're not imagining his bank account. They're imagining the conversation at Thanksgiving. They're imagining their neighbor asking, "So what's your son doing these days?" They're imagining saying, "He's an electrician," and watching the micro expression on the other person's face. That half-second downward flicker that says, "Oh, that's fine, good for him," compared to, "He's at Georgetown studying international relations," which gets an immediate eyebrow raise and a lean in. That micro expression is the entire problem. It lasts less than a second. It carries zero information about the son's actual quality of life, financial stability, or personal satisfaction. But it determines the parent's status in the social hierarchy, and that not the data, not the logic, not the math, is what drives the decision. I call this status debt. It's the invisible tax you pay when you make decisions based on how they'll be perceived instead of how they'll perform. The parent who steers their son toward a prestigious university isn't buying their son an education. They're buying themselves a status signal. "My son goes to Tulane" is a social currency that "my son is a second-year apprentice" is not. Even when the apprentice is objectively, measurably better off, the parent is willing to let their child absorb $160,000 in debt so that they can make a deposit in their own status account. And they don't even know they're doing it. That's the insidious part. This isn't malice. It's architecture. The status signaling system is so deeply embedded in how humans evaluate each other that most people can't see it operating. They just feel the discomfort when their son says trade school, and they interpret that discomfort as wisdom. I just want something better for him. Better meaning higher status, not better outcomes, not better math, higher perceived position in a hierarchy that someone else built. Let me give you a specific example. I worked with a young man, 22 years old, sharp, good with his hands, mechanically gifted. His father was an attorney. His mother was in hospital administration. He wanted to go into HVAC. He'd done a summer internship with a local contractor, and he loved the work. He was good at it. The contractor offered him an apprenticeship on the spot. His parents nearly lost their minds. His mother cried. His father told him he was throwing away his potential. They brought in an uncle, also an attorney, to talk him out of it. They offered to pay for his entire college education if he'd just apply to a 4-year program, any program. They didn't care what he studied. They just needed the degree. Not for him. For them. For the signal. He caved. He enrolled in a business administration program at a mid-tier state school. He hated it from semester 1. His grades were mediocre because his engagement was 0. He graduated 4 years later with $68,000 in debt and a degree he's never used. He's 26 now, working as a project coordinator, making $52,000 a year. The guy who took the apprenticeship slot he turned down, licensed HVAC technician, 26 years old, making $91,000 with 0 debt, and a client list he's building. toward starting his own company. That's not a hypothetical. That's two real outcomes from one decision point. And the only variable was status debt. One set of parents could absorb the status cost of saying, my son is in the trades. The other couldn't, and the son paid the price. This is where the Drift Diagnostic from my book, Breaking the Drift, comes in. The drift isn't just about wasting time on the couch. The drift is any state where you're making life decisions based on inherited scripts rather than your own evidence. And for millions of young men, the biggest inherited script isn't be lazy. It's go to college, because that's what successful people do. That script was written by a previous generation in a previous economy for a previous set of conditions. The conditions have changed. The script hasn't. And the men running it are drifting into debt, drifting into jobs they don't want, drifting into a decade of playing catch-up, all because they followed a protocol that was optimized for someone else's status anxiety. The Sovereignty OS teaches a different framework. A sovereign man doesn't outsource his identity to a status hierarchy he didn't build. He runs his own diagnostic. He looks at his own data, his skills, his aptitudes, his financial reality, his market conditions, and he makes the decision that optimizes for his outcomes, not for his mother's cocktail party conversation. That's harder than it sounds, because the status system doesn't just live in your parents' heads, it lives in yours. You've been absorbing it since you were 5 years old. Every time an adult asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And responded to a doctor with enthusiasm and a plumber with a polite smile, your brain was logging that data. Doctor equals approval. Plumber equals tolerance. By the time you're 17 and making the biggest financial decision of your life, the status hierarchy is already installed. You don't even question it. It feels like your own preference. But it's not. It's inherited architecture. And inherited architecture that hasn't been audited is the definition of the drift. Let me talk about what I call asymmetric risk math from my book, Rig the Game. This is the framework that strips the status layer off the decision and looks at the raw engineering underneath. In any major life decision, you want to ask, what's my downside if this doesn't work? And what's my upside if it does? A 4-year degree at a mid-tier university, downside is 100,000 plus in debt, 4 years of lost earnings, and a credential that may or may not open the door you need. Upside is access to certain career tracks that require the degree as a filter, though that filter is weakening every year as companies move toward skills-based hiring. An apprenticeship in a skilled trade, downside is 4 years at lower wages while you learn, and a career path that some people will look down on. Upside is 0 debt. A licensed skill that's in critical demand, a clear path to 6 figures, and the option to start your own business with minimal capital once you are established. The risk profile isn't even comparable. The degree is a high-cost, uncertain return gamble. The apprenticeship is a low-cost, high-certainty investment. Any engineer looking at these two systems would choose the apprenticeship every time. But parents aren't running the decision through an engineering framework. They're running it through a status framework. And the status framework says the gamble is worth it because the signal is better, even when the math says it isn't. Here's what I want to leave you with. The question isn't whether the trades are a good path. The data settled that years ago. The question is whether you have the sovereignty to choose evidence over status, whether you can look at the numbers, look at your own skills and aptitudes, look at the actual conditions of the market you're entering, and make the decision that serves your life instead of someone else's perception of your life. 73% of parents can see the truth. 7% can act on it. That gap, that 66%, is the exact measure of how powerful status debt is. It overrides data. It overrides logic. It overrides the financial well-being of their own children. And the only antidote is a man who runs his own diagnostic, trusts his own evidence, and makes the call that optimizes for his reality instead of someone else's comfort. That's sovereignty, not rebellion, not contrarianism, not doing the opposite of what your parents say just to prove a point. Sovereignty is the ability to audit the inherited scripts, identify which ones serve you and which ones serve someone else's status account, and rewrite the ones that don't work. It's the most fundamental skill a man can develop, and it starts with one honest question. Am I making this decision because the evidence supports it, or because the signal feels safer? If the answer is the signal, you're paying status debt, and the interest rate is your life. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It keeps the motor running, and if you'd like to learn more, check out my books on Amazon or click the links below.